Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Voices for Excellence. I am your host, Dr. Michael Connor, CEO and founder of the Agile Evolutionary Group, and of course, proud host of VFE. And today's guest, no lie, is not only just a personal friend, a confidant in the field, but let me tell you how Dr. Houston Barber and I met. So we were one of the only individuals in our from education in our Harvard Business Analytics program. I tell you, Houston, that was probably one of the best 18 to 24 months of learning that I had in totality of my educational experience. It measures the learning vitality from my doctoral program, but this was a complete outlier because it was all in business analytics form. Analytical models, developing different analytical techniques, understanding data science, but also learning from some of the most brilliant minds in the world. And Houston, Barber and I, that's where we met in our program. And because there were so few PK20 educators in the program, obviously we always would come together and kind of like hang out in that one little crew. And we always talked about how we can apply this in the education sector. And from that program, this was it 2018, Dr. Barber? Was that?
Yeah, 218, 219. Yeah.
Yep,
So,
218 to 219. And from there, I graduated a little bit after 2020. And this was what's funny about it, Dr. Barber, is I remember when we were finalizing the program logistics, getting the orientation and everything. And it was a hybrid of in-person and online learning through Zoom. Now, I could tell you 2018 was my first introduction of Zoom. And I said to myself, I'm like, all right, live classes, online, synchronous learning. This was really at kind of like the end of the BC stage of education, beginning of DC during COVID, where Zoom just took off. We were using Zoom way before the pandemic. And it was like, oh, this is new for me, but I'll get acclimated to it. But the foresight and the vision that Harvard had, when the pandemic came, we were automatically transitioned into this synchronous type of learning, multiple hours of asynchronous videos coming back together in a synchronous form were our classes. But Houston and I connected so well, continue to have a deep relationship. He is the deputy superintendent of Fayette County Public Schools in Fayette, Kentucky, a good personal friend, a professional brother. I always say, Houston and I, the only way that you can tell that, we're brothers or not, or brothers, but, difference is because he got a lighter skin tone than me. We were separated at birth. But it is without any hesitation, it is just such an honor to have Dr. Houston Barber, the Deputy Superintendent of Fayette County Public Schools, Fayette, Kentucky, but also one of my cohort brothers from Harvard University in the Business Analytics program, Dr. Houston Barber. It is so great to have you on VFE. As you can see, I just went on and on and on. It was like a diatribe with your introductions, but I think so fondly of you and your work. So good to have you here, brother.
man, it's great to be here. And I'll tell you, it's an honor not only being on this podcast with you, but just seeing the work that's accelerated from our work at Harvard. And you're exactly right. Like the one thing that I took from the program was just really gaining insight about what's happening out in the world. With everything from artificial intelligence to programming to have an understanding of how, businesses are really moving and shaking, and that application to the K-12 world. And one of the beauties of what you've done is really take a platform and ignite, the K-12 arena. So, I'm glad to be a part of that. And one of the things that I also picked up was just how to lead in a different way. I mean, leadership can be very complex. And as you know, having the opportunity to lead lots of people, especially in big districts, you've been in big districts, I have, it takes a lot of time and energy. But if you coach up and you teach them kind of those skills of how to lead and how to grow, it really, becomes a part of the system. And so, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of takeaways, but man, it's such an honor to be on here today. Such an honor.
That's so good to have you. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about leadership. We'll talk about AI disruption. And I want to add this little tie-in to it, AI disruption from a business analytical sense, right? This context of
Mhm.
how we can have measured and strategic disruption using big data, using different analytical methodologies and techniques to be able to apply in the education sector. Yes, the platform, the agile diagnostic and AI platform. Dr. Houston Barber knows intimately where that's coming from. It's a conglomerate of the various theories and methods that we've learned in our program, as well as the caveat with education. But let's get into you, Dr. Barber, because I want my audience to know your brilliance. And yes, to my BFE audience, Dr. Houston Barber is such a brilliant man. He is a genius. I'm going to say that because you know why? I know the courses he took. We had conversations about it. And yes, you got to be pretty smart to be in that program. So absolutely. But Dr. Barber, when leaders in Kentucky, stakeholders in your district, even alumni from the Harvard Business Analytics program and Harvard in itself engage in professional dialogue as well as a professional level of application. Specifically, right, we'll focus on K-12 because I know that you're one of the experts in the K-12 industry, PK-20 industry. What song would describe your analytical and research acumen in the
Oh,
education?
wow. Wow. That's an interesting a question. However, when I think about that, I think about Kendrick Lamar. And let me say about what I can about Kendrick Lamar. Well, I know there's a lot of hype going on between
Yeah, now,
Drake.
now, Dr. Barber, interject, okay? Please, I got to interject with this. All right. And to my audience out there, Dr. Houston Barber and Kendrick Lamar, I like to say the emulation or the parallelization is what we would call in our world. This is a statistical paradox. When
Yeah.
two data variables, you're looking at them, they contradict each other, and you want to be able to unwrap for further investigation. So this is a statistical paradox, Dr. Barber. Kendrick Lamar and Dr. Houston Barber. Elaborate, please.
So the reason I say that is when you get into Kendrick's lyrics, you have to go about 3 layers deep. And so and sometimes 4. He's got a, I consider he's like a PhD in writing, because when you look at how his double meanings and triple meanings, so he has a various talents, but one of them is really breaking down double and triple meanings and how his lyrics are developed. And he's so gifted at rapping, of course, but his greatest gift is probably writing, and to do it in a way it's just incredible. So, there's a couple songs out there, but it's interesting because one of his most recent, it actually is pretty genius type, but it is a Drake diss, by the way, and that's not like us. But it actually, why I'm saying this, so it's relevant,
I love it.
is yeah, is that you think about it, when we're working in this field and we're breaking down how things look, we got to look at it from so many different layers. And a lot of times we can go into this field and think that we're going to change an organizational structure, or change how education looks for our kids today. Um, it's very difficult to shift that without really getting everybody to understand what's actually happening within. And so, for example, when we, one of the things we were looking at, for example, was our bus routes, how we're routing kids into schools, what we were doing. Also, hypothetically thinking about efficiency and effectiveness, both not just in saving dollars, but what's the most logical routes and supports. And until you really look at the data, you can't make those type of decisions. And so it's the same thing. When you're writing a song for K-12, and it fits this my style of leadership, it's got complex layers, and so a lot of times people may not understand it at first, but then as they deep dive, they begin to really see that we're changing the system while also being in the same system that currently exists. So we have to inject, different opportunities of what I would call innovation. So it's like that disruptive innovation that we learned, Dr. Connor, and bringing that about. And so the song, I think I have multiple songs, but I just like how Kendrick Lamar breaks down his lyrics. Is very savvy. He looks at it from various angles and comes at it pretty difficult to break down if you're not aware.
Yeah.
But you have to. So it's just like us. We're in the field where we can go with the system or we can change it. And so I think my style of approach, and based on what we've learned, is how do we disrupt and create new systems in the same time?
Dr. Barber, well stated. And I'm just capturing some of the themes from your sentiments that you shared with all of us. I really like first of all, Kendrick Lamar. Yes, you are right. He is masterful. He is a masterful rapper. And when you unpack it, unwrap it, analyze the lyrics, wow. One of, as you're right, he is a genius with that. But I loved how you had this intentional association with Kendrick Lamar and education, specifically on going deeper, right? That deeper lens in that analysis. And, when we talk about, disruptive innovation, always going to refer to Professor Michael Tushman's class that we took, right? Yeah, I have to, I love Michael. I got to reconnect with him, but one of his core books or key books to my audience, Lead and Disrupt. If we want to talk about the tiers of disruptive innovation, Michael does a fabulous job of unpacking that in his book. So Lead and Disrupt, that's a shout out for Michael and the work that he has that Dr. Barber is referencing. But when you think about the analysis of disruptive innovation and analyzing the structures, and I'm just going to focus on structures for a minute because those are the obvious that we see in education. Complex layers, the multitude of different layers, and unpacking those compound layers. I think about that association of our program, Dr. Barber, is unpacking those statistical variables, the complexities that are embedded within that comprehensive analysis of that data set, and really getting to the I like to say the level of specificity and sensitivity in the context of the analysis of those compounding variables for effectiveness and efficacy, how you highlighted. That is how you truly, Dr. Barber, and you stated it, disrupt a system intentionally, changing structures and systems by what you said at the outset, using the data to be able to drive efficiency and effectiveness. And the double and triple meanings, right? That association that Kendrick Lamar does, we have double and triple meanings within the compounding variables and the analysis of the structures in education to why we see exacerbated gaps and the variety of different areas. But I really loved how you associate with or have that causality relationship. We'll get down distinctively to that correlation, but that corollary relationship, but that causal relationship of disruptive innovation and using data to be able to analyze the system in totality for effectiveness is where we need to go. I always like to say, we always talk about, and you and I had a separate conversation about this, Dr. Barber, the profile of the learner, right? Or the portrait of a graduate that a district, whatever, however they contextualize it. There's a broader meaning of the portrait of a system. The portrait of a system rides the profile of a learner or portrait of a graduate. Go ahead, Dr. Barber. I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I feel like to that point, one of the difficult things that districts struggle with is really building out when they can build out like this profile of a learner, and they build out what some of the outcomes that should exist, but capturing that and building on data, uh, which, for good reason, it's tougher to measure certain things of a portrait of a learner. However, I will say, we've been stuck in this education system that really pushes a couple things, and this is not getting political, but there's a lot of push to standardize and create this standard of learning that has to exist. And in the struggle with that is that we have different types of learners. We have different types of experiences that kids face early in their lifetime. We have different types of, kids coming to us with various trauma experiences. And so if all that is pushed to the side and you put them through these learner experiences that are trying to be more common than driven to personalization, it's going to be difficult to get to that kid's passion. And so I'm speaking, high level, but when we break that down further, let's break it down like the lyrics. There is some really complex factors. And so we have to begin to measure those factors using a formulaic approach and being predictive. So those predictive analytics is critical. And so, for example, Dr. Connor, when I think about, what are the variables that are necessary to understand how successful a kid is once they walk out of a school, it is difficult to measure if you don't have a way of measuring it. One, to identify what the important pieces are for that kid to be successful. And so I'll give it a deeper layer. You've got kids that love arts. You got kids that love science. You have kids that love to play, video games, e-gaming. You got kids that are very, they read books all the time, but they also know how to write very well. One of the things is, were they provided this experience, as a child through their parents? Were they provided this experience through the schools? How are they given this experience? And then how do we know that they are actually growing and developing based on certain measures? Now, when you get further, which I'm going to go another layer, and that is when students move from grade level to grade level, if that knowledge of where they are is not carried forward, and it's just based on a test score that's from a year past, it's hard to really gauge. And so that's how our system has lived. Our system has lived on a test score label. And so that's why we have the gaps we have. That's why we have the expectations that are lower for kids that come from various backgrounds. And so with your permission for a moment, the formula you have focuses in on the expectations. It focuses in on the performance, and it gets to the art of how kids have to have access. And so we have to measure the right things.
Absolutely.
And we got to use big data. We got to use little data. We got to use predictive analytics. We got to get deep. We got to use everything from SQL to Python to R to the latest and greatest opportunities to better understand the variables that are making a difference. And, all these meta studies that take place, which you've studied, you've read about every single piece about anything from Hattie to what's going on in the world of today. But I think we have to take in consideration what factors there are with where the location and even geography of that child, because that makes an impact on their local factors. And so that's something that's often not taken consideration when it comes to the portrait of a learner and the systems that exist in the district.
Well stated, Dr. Barber. That's a nice segue into our next question. But a statement that you highlighted, or the statement that you just stated that resonates with me, measure the right things, right? And using both big data as well as small data. Now, one thing that you and I, Houston, talk about pretty frequently is that um, education in totality, the ecosystem, does not underscore or optimize big data because of the limited infrastructure to be able to support big data. As an example, would be having these IoT platforms with real-time data that are conducting linear and logistical regressions around key ideas around the right things to measure. We don't have those capabilities yet. You and I have been advocating for that. We've only been utilizing small metrics or small data to analyze, but local factors that need to be strategically integrated into the model, and the rules that are developed within these engines are very vital to that. That's a new capability and capacity that you and I have been advocating for, right? Because this standardization of learning through measuring students through one assessment metric is does not suffice to the holistic child that you're talking about, the whole child. But Dr. Barber, segue into that, right? When we're talking about building on data, using a variety of different programs, as you said, SQL, Python, R, predictive analytics, and descriptive analytics. We're both graduates of the Harvard Business Analytics program at Harvard University. And using this, right, using this approach is so necessary in education. We we've seen education titans like Michael Horn underpin concepts from the business science world, right? We've seen him reauthor practices by borrowing different practices and methods from Clay Christensen's work. But when we think about this from this reauthorization aspect of advanced analytics and computer science concepts, how do you think data analytics, data science, and statistical modeling will be interfaced in education? You kind of alluded to it on a surface level, but I want you to go deeper with that. What should be the first steps to ensure we're securing a learning organization using big data and analytics in the AC stage of education?
Yeah. So, can you hear me okay? Because I know my screen's like a little uh, off. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you okay, Dr. Barber. Go right ahead.
Okay, good. Good. So I think one big thing that's really interesting right now is districts struggle with big data. They also struggle with long-term, or I recall a year after year statistical analyses breaking down what's actually happened. What's going to have to happen in especially in the after COVID years is we're really going to have to take into consideration a couple things. And one is AI is moving so fast. And so, for example, ChatGPT, the school districts are struggling right now with even understanding how to use it. And so they're struggling with everything from how to develop guidance and how to help teachers analyze this. So I want to go there for a minute. If teachers don't use it as a tool, they're going to get left behind. And so I think what teachers are afraid of is, hey, is this taking over? Is it going to take my place? The answer is not going to take your place, but it will take your place if you don't use it, which means someone else will come in and utilize it. And so having said that, things are moving so fast, and organically speaking, we have to be able to have the right variables. And so let's go deep on that. When I think about SQL, like I have a team of people looking at different factors. We're doing an analysis on our master schedules right now. Mm-hmm. Kids have access throughout their careers to certain types of opportunities. Looking at that profile of that child who gets access to, these incredible opportunities throughout our district, does every child get those same opportunities? So breaking down that data, looking at specific things surrounding what are those variables that lead to that child having that access, and is the master schedule shaped appropriately? So let's break this down further. When we model or we're looking at data science, are we actually breaking down, what's real time? Are we looking at past, master schedules? Like if we took 5 years of master schedules at one of our elementaries, we did a comparison analysis across all our elementaries, and we took the controlled for several factors, but then took the diversity of our populations, the demographics, and we broke that down and we said, okay, we've noticed that some of our smaller elementaries only offer these type of programs. And we've noticed that at our special programs, only these type of students get access to these special programs.
Unbelievable
That
analysis.
that that in itself will help break down how we give offerings to our kids. And you know this better than anybody. Maximize our staff, to utilize them efficiently, maximize our classroom spaces, maximize how students in classrooms and how to utilize them, so that all of this together, our resources are optimized. And so we're working, beginning that process. And in this AC stage of education, we've got to take that type of approach. And so we're not all there yet. But if districts aren't looking at this, they're gonna find themselves not in tune with what needs to happen for their students, their faculty, their staff, their how to break that down. So I'm just bringing that to the attention. But at the same time, while that's happening, we have to use different tools, in our classroom, because we're not going to engage we're going to lose our students, to other opportunities. They're already learning. Like they're learning every single day with AI. They're learning every single day through Instagram, Snapchat, you name it, they have access. So we got to get ahead of, or at least get on par with what kids are already doing. So
Unbelievable. Dr. Barber, I always say this every single episode with answers that resonates with me to my core and purpose and why. And I always state this, right? We use VFV as a asynchronous professional learning tool so that leaders, practitioners, ed tech CEOs, governance members, policy developers, legislators, to be able to use this for professional learning. Your answer with regards to the analysis of the master schedule, to my audience, please rewind that answer, because Dr. Barber gave a simplistic answer on how to use data science and predictive analytics to be able to target specific efficiencies and next steps to improve effectiveness within the organization. Now, the example that Dr. Barber provided was around master scheduling and time. He talked about how he controlled, in that analysis, they're using SQL, how he controlled some of the core variables within that analysis, so that now they're using that data not for binary answers of yes and no, but further investigation on what tools are effective, how to be able to maximize time for effectiveness. But one of the residual effects, the outcomes or the outputs, would be higher academic performance because of the conditional changes based off of the data. Dr. Barber, wow. You are bringing data science into master scheduling to now close specific gaps so that you can maximize student outcomes and performance. I want to ask a sub question, because you hit upon every single point of how to create a data science formula and methods into the education sector. when you talk about you're controlling some of the variables, I like to say some of the local variables, using historical data that you use, which were multiple years of master scheduling and analysis. Wow, that is a huge endeavor to building team capabilities and capacities around that level of interrogation of data for that specific problem that you're analyzing, how to be able to maximize time for efficiencies and effectiveness for higher outcomes. But that takes time to build. First off, how did you start the transition of analyzing small data into this data science aspect from a predictive standpoint? And two, what were some of the pain points? Because some, leaders might say, wow, is that really worth it going that depth into it? Yes, it is. But how did you carry that on, building that systems capacity around that?
Yeah, I think when we first kind of started this approach, and again, we're really doing a dive and coming up with some strategy on how to do it better. But when we first started, some of the challenges that existed, one are getting the appropriate and accurate master schedules that existed at the school levels, because as you know, people leave, leaders come and go, and sometimes just because it's in Infinite Campus, a platform that we use, that master schedule may not actually reflect what was actually happening, and so that was the pain point. Another challenge is, resources. Everybody's always asking for more. And I think when I say this, I'm talking about like more staff, more support. But the reality is we have to look at the actual schedules that exist at our schools. Elementary schedules are pretty uniform to a degree, depending on how many students are in that building. Middle starts to change. High is completely, it depends on the type of schedule. And so that's a factor you have to think about, and a variable that impacts dollars, cents, time, energy. But those were some pain points because not everybody has the same schedule. And so when that happens, those variables, time, beginning and ending times, it sounds real simple. Bus routes, or you can look geographically at the different types of neighborhoods our students are coming from. The factor demographics, looking at free and reduced poverty. And so I think that those are factors that come into play and have to be considered. So, yeah.
Oh man, Dr. Barber, you just created, I like to say, a modeling nirvana, right? And you have about, I was just, as you were going through, there's about 6 or 7 questions that I would love to be able to model against, to find out what was some of the readings of the coefficients and the p-values within that. Absolutely amazing. But what I love about it too, Dr. Barber, is you're taking, I like to say, potential variable metrics, i.e., the routes of students from transportation and how that affects time. Unbelievable how you're measuring that. But I want to go back to something you stated at the outset about AI replacing humans. And from one of our professors that we had, Dr. Kareem Lakhani, one of his favorite quotes, and you paraphrase it, which is great, and I love it. Kareem, one of the great guys in the field, he stated that AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans that don't have AI. And it's so true with that. So true. So true.
It's moving so fast that the teachers who are afraid to, bring that in platform and opportunity into their class are seeing that they're losing their students and they're losing engagement. And so, what we're seeing is that students are already using ChatGPT. They're using other platforms. They use it in a way that's really, something that could be useful in creation, in development of opportunities for them. And it's not just, I think there was a fear about copyright and copying and plagiarism, and the idea is let's embrace it. Let's come up with a strategy where kids feel that's a part of the solution structure, and instead of teachers fearing it. But what's happening so fast is that it came, how quickly it's come, that the teachers, without, especially teachers who have been in the classroom for a while, they struggle with that ability to, well, even if they know how to use technology, even if they know how to use Chat GPT, what it looks like for kids. And so that's a very good question. I do think that it's evolving so quickly. I mean, we've seen kids create their own little chat bots, and their own little AI solution people. I mean, they're creating their own figures that come out of the woodwork, so to speak, and they actually are reinventing what AI looks like for a kid, for a classroom. So anyway, it's a really powerful experience once teachers embrace it.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. And when we talk about, Chat GPT, and I believe Chat 4.0 was just released,
Yeah.
you're already saying that, which is so true. We're as an ecosystem in totality, we're at this novice neophyte level. But when we think about it from an organizational coherence standpoint, we have to factor in that there are three different type of AIs that we have to embed within our strategy. Generative AI, what you're talking about with ChatGPT, predictive AI, and then also reactive AI. Those are the three type of strategies that we have to, or approaches with AI that we have to integrate within our organizational design. But that's further down the line for another episode. But what I love about your answer, Dr. Barber, is that you took this strategic thinking and strategic performance management and moved that into what I call systems thinking and into action, which is around system shifting. Amazing, Dr. Barber, of how you contextualize that with master scheduling. But, I want to expand on that. Kind of segues into the next question around the standardized operating model in education, right? Where what you have just identified in your answer with regards to master schedule and looking for efficiencies and effectiveness, that is rooted in lean practices, agile thinking, and non-traditional practices that are outside the factory-based model, right? Just how now schools are going to start developing their master schedules based off of that big data and analytical thinking. But when we think about classroom pedagogy specifically, right? Learning has to be, I like to say, experiential. It has to be cycled for conceptual rigor and problem-based that focused on developing student competencies and skills. In your perspective, Dr. Barber, where are we currently as an ecosystem with regards to the mandates for this level of transformation? And two, what is the pathway for success to achieve alignment with the economic and industry demands that are underscored in Delta 2030?
Yeah, so I think of it this way, and that is, well, first let me back up just a moment. With Chat GPT, let's just say for a second, teachers can, instead of planning all night, 2 weeks ahead, 3 weeks ahead, they can get lesson plans in less than 2 seconds. And so what can happen is they can try these lesson plans, have a little faith in some of the things that come out of Chat GPT, let's say 4.0. And they actually have the lesson planning. And so their time can be spent on individually pursuing how kids learn and how they can help embed opportunities for them to grow in their own passions, as opposed to spending all their time lesson planning and embarking on trying to execute that lesson plan. They can actually get more personalized. Here's where we are. A lot of school districts are being more personalized in their approach, but I think they're off a little bit. And what I mean by that is they spend a lot of time where kids are on a computer and they think that's personalization, or they have a program where kid is doing a personalized, quote unquote, personalization approach.
Yeah.
To me, to me, there is a factor missing there, and that is an understanding of how that kid learns
Yeah.
best and how they actually are doing along the way to ensure that there's checkpoints that are happening. We understand teachers are facilitators and they're growing that trend, and it's not just sage on the stage, as you have mentioned in our conversations previously. But it's really about how does a teacher use a kid's learning style, their ability to embed the most appropriate pedagogy that is not just for that type of learning experience, but that they can use later on when in their careers, and they can use later on to build those skill sets that are necessary to be successful, and they can help them to become better thinkers and better, I call it teach them how to fish. You know this better than anybody. We have struggled in the K-12 industry with trying to just throw the strategy of the month, the
Right.
the the, the software of the year, the platform of the decade.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
really missing is your model, because your model brings about a continuous improvement approach
Yeah.
that thinks about not just historical trends, but uses real-time data. So
Mm.
for people out there watching this model is going to take over because it's going to allow districts to basically look at their own challenges, bring out what's happening within their own perspectives, and reflect back on the data they see to make informed decisions. And I think when it comes to classroom pedagogy, we're struggling as the United States because there's so many conflicts happening on how to teach, and there's
Mm-hmm.
so many conflicts on what to teach. And so with that conflict, it's a strategic collision, Dr. Connor. We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about that before. The
Mm-hmm.
perfect moment where disruptive innovation and the old methods start to collide.
Mm-hmm.
But the crazy part is some people's disruptive innovation is not really disruptive at all.
Right.
It is actually counter to that. And so I think it's all about what's actually happening. So you got national trends, you got state trends, you got local trends, and we've got to get a instead of being driven by legislative bodies and vendors, we need to be looking at what's happening in the world in terms of careers,
Yeah.
opportunities, where we're headed. If we can't get past that, and that's speaking high level, it's going to be tough for school districts to move because they're going to get caught up in the politics of it. So I'll say one other thing about pedagogy. We go back to Michael Fullen. Coherence is everything. But how do we do it in a way that focuses on future opportunities and skill sets that are needed for those? Because you can be coherent, you can be the Nokia of the past. You can be the Blockbuster, you can be the Kodak. But when the change happens, when the pedagogy has to shift for the future, you have to think about what actually looks different and how kids learn differently now, and give them those tools and access to those tools so they can be successful, as opposed to just you know, no use of calculators. I've never understood that. No use of this, no use of that. Who who cares, right? That's what the world does.
Right.
There's robots doing surgeries now. There's semi trucks riding on the road right now that aren't being driven by humans. There's things happening in this world that are moving so fast. Who cares about using a calculator anymore? Who cares
Right.
about
Right.
and I
Right.
understand the concepts, but come on, we're in a different phase, in a different time. So the pedagogy, we can't get caught up in what's been taught in the past. We have to look at what's actually happening. And so I'm going to go back to what I said. It's a strategic collision. We're struggling with identity. It's an identity crisis, Dr. Connor. And the identity crisis is reached all school districts, both public and charter and private, across the United States, especially. And so that continues.
That Dr. Barber, well stated, a profound answer. Strategic collision. We are in a current identity crisis. I concur with you on that. I really love how you articulated the need for real-time data. And when I think of that, I always go back to IoT platforms. And that's what we've been advocating, that we need IoT platforms with real-time data so that we can access or assess and evaluate right there to interrogate some of those data variables that are causing us to have these descriptive level questioning around that. But I really, really love that. And then I think that, within this identity crisis that we have in the education ecosystem, one of the things that we have to do, Dr. Barber, is we have to contextualize and define what disruptive innovation is, because passive innovation can be misconstrued for disruptive innovation, and we're truly not addressing some of the systemic issues that need to be interrogated as well as investigated with this level of intentionality. I love that. But I want to expand on this strategic collision identity crisis. And when I think about that, in order to address that, we have to look at how we're deliberately building human and social capital around the necessary practices and methods in accordance to, let's just use this as an example, around this disruptive innovation process or disruptive innovative process to transform or reimagine legacy structures and systems and the operating model. Now, what are some insights and strategies to advance professional learning that emulates this true personalization, albeit disruptive model for students? What is that collective social capital building look like in education?
Yeah, I think for example, there's some great examples of this or models of this throughout the country. Um, I look at Michael Matsuda out in California. He's working on some really powerful experiences in that profile of the learner, on what that actually means to a child and to a family. And so he's building out in his community that it's not just about the standards that we're learning, it's about how we're preparing our kids for real world experiences in life and the next level of careers. And I think the professional learning surrounding that he does is he allows his teachers to embrace AI, embrace data, embrace what it means to take risks while being in a system that monitors what happens with test scores, and people look in the community and they're like, but we have to tell our own story. And so I'm going to be very practical here for a moment. We have to actually use data that makes sense for our kids, but then translate what that means to the public. What the public sees is that this school is not performing well. The kids are not doing well. But what we should be telling is that's actually not the story. The story is our kids are learning the skills and the necessary, knowledge to actually take over, and use these special tools. So professional learning has to be about just like what you're doing and what we're about to embrace. And I'm a part of the experimental group, which for those watching, I'm really excited about this and Dr. Connor's model. But what I see it is like taking strategic actions, tactics, and using the most appropriate big data, small data, local trends, and figuring out ways to close those gaps. And I think that type of professional learning has to exist. And for students, they have to have agency on what they're not only learning about, but what teachers are learning about. And I think that's a missing piece. You know what's funny, Dr. Connor, is when we build things in education, it's often built by people who don't utilize it.
Right,
So think about
right,
that.
right, right.
We should have people who are building things built for, built by. So, for example, students should be a part of the strategies for developing that professional learning because they're the ones that are going to be faced with the changes that take place in the classroom.
Mm.
But what do we do as educators? We build it without embracing those,
Yeah,
at least some student agency. And I think people fear, well, what can students tell us? We're the experts. They can tell you a lot. They can tell you a lot about how they're engaged, about how they learn, and they can at least give us some insight on how to improve our practice.
yeah. And you know what, Dr. Barber, it always baffled me. Um, and then also I want to bring another element that also astounds me that um, in the business world, business sciences, when we think about developing a product or a solution and testing it, what is the first line of feedback that we received? We received from our end users,
Yeah.
from our most important customers, right? So in education, if we're going to emulate that to get feedback from our end users or to generate specific comments or ideas to improve on specific systems and structures in education, we fundamentally fail to ask our most important customers, families, students, about what would be a better product that, or how we can continuously to iterate, to develop or to improve the product, i.e., education that we are delivering from them or for them. So we do it in other industries, but we rely on a high level of, I like to say, codified expertise that doesn't include the voices of our students and families. Very, very essential and critical to improving the service delivery model, elements of the operating model in education. I'm so glad you brought that up, Dr. Barber. I know you wanted to say something. Go right ahead.
No, I'm with you. I think it's interesting that a lot of professional learning that districts pay for, like millions of dollars, or even smaller districts pay thousands of dollars, is on professional learning that is cookie cutter, or it's personalized, but it's personalized towards a particular area. And so I think there has to be that thought about what are we really doing, as an organization to impact and get the results we want. Because if we keep doing what we keep doing, we're going to get the same result.
Same results. And the gap is going to be exacerbated even more because one thing that I think is not going to change. And one of the core variables and that we have to take into consideration and factor into our statistical models that we're creating and running these regressions or running, different type of analytical outputs that we want to look at is controlling for Generation Z and Generation Alpha. And then also controlling for or engineering and controlling for the data for their attributes so that we can have a true analysis of what are some of the standardized systems and how we can innovate with intentionality. But one of the other questions I want to segue into is this abundance or this focus on jobs, right? And really moving from, I like to say, the legacy model that predicates on knowledge work, knowledge-based attainment, to this, I like to say, 22nd century model focused on career readiness and digital readiness. Now, with industry jobs about to increase exponentially, specifically in the areas of computer science and IT. Computer science industry expected to grow 13%, and forecasted information technology forecasted 23% over the next 6.5 years. What does this mean, Dr. Barber, for how we um, create systems within standardized structures to move from this knowledge-based knowledge attainment operating model to an operating model, as you stated from the outset, that is aligned to some of the industry and market demands for the 22nd century.
If we don't get on board, we are going to lose kids and families. It's that simple. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Enrollments, here's the facts. Enrollments across the country are dropping. Where are these kids going? They're not going necessarily to other schools. They're going to other learning experiences that exist.
Yes.
And I can share this with you. It's just like employees. Employees can work from home now. I'm not saying it's everybody, but there are opportunities that have, that people have embraced and they've changed. We've got to get with the times. And so otherwise our structures are going to fall apart. Instead of building buildings, we need to focus on providing experiences. So, and what I mean by this may sound really simple, but it's complex. And it's a Kendrick Lamar verse right here. And that is a lot of school districts are still building buildings. We need to focus in on these authentic experiences that kids can get and receive, for example, as apprenticeships, as internships, and have teachers have externships. There needs to be learning experiences count outside of the school day. If that does not happen, we're going to lose kids fast and furious. And we're losing teachers as a result too, because, they have opportunities to make 3 times the amount and work from home or work a different type of a job that brings a different type of learning to them. And so we've got to get with the times. And I'll tell you what, college is in trouble. When I mean that, your 4-year traditionals, that they'll never go away, but they're in trouble if they don't reshape. If you look at it out there, people they no longer have to go get their MBA. They can get it in, 10 months through a concentrated program from the best in the world, that are already doing it, and they know what to do. So we just got to get on board with here and now. We're moving faster. There's a lot of research out there. Get better faster, right? There's a book out there. I think if we don't improve our tactics and relax the ability on attendance laws, relax the ability on, how we work with our students, we are going to struggle keeping them in school. So at the end of the day, we're not only going to lose out on attendance, we're going to lose them completely.
Yeah. And you're highlighting some of the vanity measures, right? With attendance, outputs. But here's where I think that you and we have that critical analysis where we want to go deeper into the root cause to address that, right? Because when we think about, students not showing up, now have to go into the second tier of why are students disengaged, and delineating that from a statistical standpoint of what are some of those core attributes that are, propagating this disengagement, which turns into this vanity output or measure of our chronic absenteeism rates are very high, right? When we look at that. And you talked, and I love how you phrased this, Dr. Barber, of, when you're calling for new learning experiences within the disruptive effect model and the disruptive excellence framework of my conceptual model, I talk about moving from coherence process 2, which is architectural innovation, where now coherence process 3 is that level of serial disruption. You describe serial disruption in the education model, where we're looking at different learning experiences where it's hands-on and it's not standardized by a letter grade or a percentile. Unbelievable, Dr. Barber. Unbelievable. But last question. Yes, you made it, man. You made it. Last question now. This is going to be, look, for an educator of your caliber, this is going to be very difficult for you to do. But take this question as it is. Now, Dr. Barber, this is the only time as a friend, as an educator, as someone I bounce strategic ideas off of, someone I trust in the field. I will never limit you, my brother. I will never limit you. But for this one question, I'm going to limit you. What 3 words and only three and only 3 words, brother. And only 3 words. But I'm gonna have you elaborate, of course. But what 3 words do you want today's audience to leave our episode with, understanding the importance of, and you contextualized it pretty much the whole podcast episode. What do you want our audience to leave with, understanding the importance of global intelligence? Wow, now I'm expanding it. Global intelligence in the AC stage of education.
So this is what's on the mind. It could be totally oh, wait a minute, but I only got 3 words. So my 3 words are join the revolution.
Ooh. In about 3 sentences, can you unpack that? Join the revolution. Right? You're sounding like Public Enemy, fight the power.
Well, so the reason
I love it.
the reason I say it that way is it's got 3 different probably meanings to it. And one is, it's do or die time. And I think education as we sit is falling to pieces politically. Um, you know, the identity crisis has happened. And so we've got to shape our identity. And so we need to come together on what that looks like. And like you said earlier, we have to define what disruptive innovation means. And because if it's passive, people might think it's actually disrupting when it's not doing anything but creating more chaos. The third sentence I would tell you is this is do or die time in this sense, and that is we are moving so fast with learning, and there's so much hypothetical. But if we don't look at the data close enough, we're still, even with these fast-paced tools, we're still going to be stuck with the same gaps. And so when I think about what you're doing, Dr. Connor, on the performance gap, the preparation gap, the access gap, and these expectation gaps, we can close all of those gaps with this type of model because it gets to the heart of understanding where people are. So what I'm saying is it's now or never. And so we got to join the revolution.
Absolutely. Revolutionizing education. Dr. Houston Barber, it has been an absolute honor. It has been fun. And this is pretty much, I like to say, this is the emulation of our telephone calls when we talk to each other, whether it be weekly. We wind up talking like this, and now the whole world get to experience what a telephone call is between Dr. Houston Barber and Dr. Michael Connor. But Dr. Barber, the way that you contextualized and unpacked master scheduling, getting down to the level of specificity with certain impact variables, looking at different contributing attributes into that model that people might not catch initially. If they want to contact you, Dr. Barber, how would they be able to do that to further expand upon the nuggets that you provided today?
Yeah, I'd love to. They can reach me. We can provide them with both my email and cell phone. So I have no problem as long as they reach out and let me know who it is and what they're seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your email address, Dr. Barber?
So it's Houston HOUSTON.Barber BARBER at Fayette. So it's FAYETTE KYschools.US. And then my cell is 502-314-8960. And feel free to reach out, and love to have conversations or opportunities to help expand on that work.
Absolutely. And to my audience, Dr. Barber will make himself available to you. He's always been available to me. Obviously, like I said, I look to Dr. Barber as one of the education confidants that I can have the depth and breadth with the level of intentionality and the scope of my questions, where Houston brings a nice, simplistic, coherent, sequenced answer to any of my questions that I might have. That is why I consider Houston just not a great educator, but a true friend I have leaned on for multiple years. And Dr. Barber, it has just been an extraordinary time with you on VFE. I told you a couple of years ago when I was starting this, you're like, go do it, man. And I'm like, you got to come on. Well, it took you season two, brother. I know you're busy. I know you're busy, man. But season two, I'm just glad to have you on, Doc. I appreciate you so much in everything that you do for your kids in Fayette, but more importantly, what you do across the country nationally. He is one of the education, I like to say, czars with data. Please get in contact with him, because if you think I am really bad with data, as a lot of my audience members says, Houston is 10 times worse than me. And I say he is one of the best in the country. So please tap into his genius and reach out to him with any of your questions, because he will find some of the most mundane ways to look at data so that you can be able to, I like to say, create that creative tension within your system so it will allow you to innovate and be creative. Dr. Barber, thank you so much for being on VFE.
Appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely. And on that note, onward and upward, everybody. Have a great evening.